The galaxy was wide and full of many voices, yet among them one voice was rising stronger and louder, and it was the voice of Earth, for Earth had changed from a quiet world of survivors into a world of warriors and builders and dreamers, and its ships now moved across the black sea of stars with purpose and with courage, while old empires who once laughed at humans now felt unease at their growing strength and their daring. The empire in question was vast and proud. It had ruled for thousands of years, and it believed no young race could ever challenge its rule, for the empire had seen countless new species rise and fall, and always it had been the one to decide who lived and who was crushed. But Earth was different, for Earth had been tempered by wars, by hunger, by storms, and by endless struggle, and so the people of Earth had learned to never surrender and to never trust. Sweet words that hid sharp claws. It began with whispers in the hidden places of the galaxy. Traders and scouts told stories of strange warnings left in the void near the borders of Empire space, glowing signals that burned in red across the dark void. The warnings said, "Do not enter these regions, the path is cursed, and the hand of Earth watches all who pass." Yet the Empire laughed at such signs, for it thought humans were weak children who liked to paint shadows larger than they were. One commander of the Empire, a cold leader with silver armor and eyes like frozen steel, said to his council, "Let the humans bark their little warnings, for we are the storm that crushes all resistance, we are the fire that burns forests, we are the Empire, and nothing stands in our path." And his words were greeted with cheers by his generals, for they too thought Earth was nothing more than an ant daring to raise its head against giants. But in the quiet chambers of Earth Command, leaders studied maps of stars and patterns of fleets, their eyes sharp and their hands steady as they laid their plan, for they knew the Empire would not listen. They knew arrogance would blind their foe, and they built their ambush like hunters building a pit covered with leaves, waiting for the great beast to step without care. The ships of Earth were smaller than those of the Empire, but they carried minds sharper than blades and strategies woven like webs. The humans had built hidden stations along forgotten asteroid fields. They had shaped debris into false trails. They had filled space with silence that looked empty but was alive with sensors and traps. It was not the power of size they trusted, but the power of patience and cunning. As the first signs of the Empire fleet moved closer through the black void, the people of Earth did not shout, and they did not tremble. Instead, they waited with eyes steady and breaths calm, like hunters in the tall grass, waiting for the beast to step into their circle. On the border world of Haven, a planet with oceans like silver glass and skies burning gold with dawn, the civilians looked upward, knowing that beyond their sky a storm was coming, and they whispered prayers not of fear, but of strength, for they knew their warriors were ready, and they knew Earth had learned from every scar and from every battle in its past. In orbit above Haven, the fleet of Earth gathered silent and hidden behind the shadows of moons, their hulls painted black to blend with the void, their weapons quiet yet alive with waiting energy, and each captain spoke to their crew, saying, "Remember what we fight for, remember the ground we came from, the homes we protect, and the children who must grow without chains." Meanwhile, the Empire fleet entered the region with banners high and with engines burning bright. They believed no warning could harm them, no trap could ensnare them, for they were the Empire, and they thought all others were dust beneath their boots. They did not know that every signal they ignored was another step into the jaws of Earth. The first tension came when the lead ships of the Empire passed near an asteroid belt, and sensors whispered faint readings of power fields. The officers dismissed it as background noise, saying, "The humans cannot reach us here, they are too weak, too scattered, too late," and they moved forward proud and blind. In the hidden chambers of Earth Command, the generals watched through long-range feeds, their voices calm yet sharp as they marked each movement of the Empire ships. Every step closer to the trap was a step closer to history. Every ignored warning was proof that arrogance would be their undoing, and one general, an old man with scars across his face, whispered, "Let them walk deeper, for once they see the teeth of Earth, it will be too late." The silence of space grew heavy. The Empire ships glided without care, but Earth ships followed, hidden in shadows, unseen like wolves tracking prey through the forest, their engines low, their lights dark, and their crews waiting for the signal, each heartbeat stretched like an eternity, every second a test of will. The Empire admiral stood at the front of his command bridge, surrounded by golden light and polished steel. He raised his voice, saying, "The humans hide like cowards, and yet we march forward without fear, for we are the Empire, and no ambush can harm us." And his officers cheered, though some deep within felt a shadow of doubt, for the galaxy had whispered warnings too many times, and they wondered if pride had blinded their leader. Still the fleet pressed on, unaware that around them the web of Earth was closing piece by piece, thread by thread. The humans had built a cage of light and fire, and soon the jaws would close. On Earth itself, cities glowed with lights as people gathered in silence, watching the feeds from far space. They did not shout, they did not sing, for they knew this was not the time for celebration. It was the time of waiting, the time of testing, the moment where the will of humanity would face the might of an ancient empire, and either break or prove unshakable. The trap was near completion, every piece was in place, and every ship was ready. The humans did not rush, for they knew haste was the friend of failure. They waited calm, steady, silent, like hunters holding their breath as the beast wandered closer and closer. And then the signal came across every hidden channel, across every ship of Earth, a single word spoken with calm power. It said, "Now." The news of the Empire fleet moving closer to Earth spread across the galaxy like a fire in the wind, and every world that had once whispered about the strength of humans now spoke with voices filled with fear and curiosity, for they knew that Earth had been silent for so long, hiding in the shadows, yet preparing in ways no one could understand, and now the great question rose in every council and every chamber: what would happen when the Empire fleet reached the home of mankind? The Empire commanders sat in their warships with pride in their hearts and arrogance in their eyes, for they believed the humans were weak and broken, and no longer a power worth notice. They spoke of Earth as a forgotten relic, a world that once tried to rise, but fell back into dust. They ignored the warnings from scouts, and ignored the whispers from old archives that spoke of the human traps, and cunning. The commanders laughed, and said no small world could trick the Empire. Yet in the silent halls of Earth Command, the leaders of humanity gathered in hidden bunkers deep under mountains and oceans, their faces cold, and their eyes sharp, for they had been waiting for this moment. They had known for decades that the Empire would one day grow bold and attempt to crush Earth. They had built weapons no one had ever seen, machines that lived between technology and something greater, and strategies that bent the rules of space itself. The hook of the plan was simple yet terrible: to draw the Empire into a place where power meant nothing, where their numbers and weapons would twist against them and become chains instead of swords, for humanity had created a theater of war that the Empire could not even imagine. As the Empire fleet passed the line of outer satellites, they saw strange signals, weak echoes, and broken transmissions. They thought it was only old machines dying in orbit. They thought nothing of the strange silence beyond the first line of defenses, and they laughed, saying the humans could not even repair their satellites. But what they did not see was the hand of Earth waiting behind the curtain. On Earth, cities went dark in silence, people hid in shelters under streets, and oceans, children whispered to each other, asking what the sky would look like when the Empire arrived. Some were afraid, some were brave, but all of them trusted the command, for they knew humans had been broken before, and each time they came back stronger. The fleet of the Empire grew closer, their warships like black mountains moving through space, their weapons glowing with power. They expected Earth to surrender in fear, they expected humans to beg for mercy, but as they came near the blue planet, nothing happened. No shots, no words, no warnings, only silence, and this silence began to stir unease, even among the Empire soldiers, for silence was not weakness, it was something else, something hidden. The first ships of the Empire moved into orbit, and they began to scan the surface of Earth. Their sensors found strange energy patterns deep below the ground and strange heat rising from the oceans, but before they could understand it, the trap began to unfold. The skies of Earth opened with a storm, not of weather but of energy beams that rose from mountains and oceans. They were not simple lasers, not missiles, not plasma, but something new, something alive. The beams twisted around the Empire shields, bending through their defenses, as if the shields were nothing. The first Empire ships burned not from fire, but from silence, their engines dying, their power fading like light swallowed by shadow. The commanders shouted in anger. They ordered their fleets to fire, to strike back with all their strength, and the void above Earth became a sea of explosions and fury, but nothing touched the ground, for Earth had cloaked itself in a shield of illusions, turning every shot aside, making the Empire see things that were not there and miss what was real. And then the second phase of the trap began as ships rose from the hidden bases on the dark side of the moon. They were not massive like the Empire battleships, they were sleek and fast, and moved like shadows. They darted into the Empire lines, cutting through their formations, slicing their hulls with weapons that left no fire, only silence. The Empire soldiers felt fear for the first time. They saw ships vanish without sound. They saw their weapons useless against the small darting shapes. They realized too late that they were inside a trap built over decades, a trap designed not for defense but for humiliation. On Earth Command, the leaders watched with grim faces. They knew this was only the beginning. The Empire had numbers beyond counting, and this first strike was meant only to break their pride. But deep inside the command halls, the humans knew if the Empire learned from this battle, the real war would begin. The hook tightened when the Empire commander called for reinforcements, his voice cold but shaken, and he demanded the fleet regroup and crush the humans at once. Yet, as he gave his order, the stars around Earth shimmered, and new figures appeared in the dark, for Earth had not only hidden weapons, it had hidden allies too. At the edge of the battlefield, ships older than the Empire itself appeared, their designs strange, their hulls covered in symbols lost to time, and they stood beside the humans, silent but ready, and the Empire soldiers gasped, for they realized Earth had called something back, something the galaxy thought was gone forever. The battle paused for a moment like the breath before a storm, and in that silence the Empire soldiers felt the weight of fear pressing on their hearts, for they knew they were not just fighting Earth, they were fighting a plan written long before they arrived. And as the first Allied ship opened fire with a beam that tore an Empire cruiser apart, the commanders finally understood they had not walked into battle, they had walked into a graveyard. The chapter ended with the Empire fleet in chaos, their pride shattered, their numbers breaking, and the humans silent, watching with eyes that held no fear, only patience, for they knew the trap was still tightening, and the Empire had only just stepped into the first circle. The Empire had always believed that strength came from numbers and from ships that stretched across the stars like endless rivers of metal. They thought that no single world could stand against them, yet as they pressed forward toward Earth, their confidence began to shake. The silence from the humans was no longer the silence of fear, it was the silence of planning, the silence of something hidden in the dark. The fleets of the Empire glided forward, engines burning bright like false suns in the void. Their admirals believed the warnings of the smaller alien races meant nothing, yet whispers began to grow in their own command halls. What if the humans truly were different? What if Earth had not stayed quiet because it was weak, but because it was waiting? The younger officers voiced this thought, but the older lords dismissed it. Still in the corners of their minds, unease crawled like shadows. Earth itself appeared on the screens of the Empire fleet, blue and green and cloud-wrapped, a world that looked calm and fragile. The admirals laughed at the sight, calling it a jewel they would crush into dust. Yet on Earth, deep below the oceans and mountains, machines long prepared began to awaken. Hidden silos rumbled, command bunkers filled with voices, and the ghost of every warning the aliens had given now took form in steel and fire. A scout fleet moved ahead of the main armada. Their task was to scan and test the defenses of Earth. They expected a few satellites, maybe primitive weapons. What they found was silence, the kind of silence that makes warriors nervous. Scanners picked up strange distortions around the orbit of Earth, fields of debris that looked too organized, shadows that shifted as if ships were hiding among them. Still they reported back that the path was open. The admirals ordered the main fleet forward. The first wave of invasion craft broke orbit and began to descend, but as they did the debris fields came alive. Thousands of pieces of rock and metal were not random at all. They were disguised stations and automated cannons, hidden in plain sight, and they began to fire with precision that cut through the leading ships. Explosions lit the black sky. The Empire commanders shouted in disbelief. How had humans built such weapons without notice? How had they hidden them under the very noses of the galaxy? On Earth, civilians watched from bunkers, their hearts pounding. They had feared this day for years, but they had been told to trust in the plan, trust that humanity would not be prey. Above them the sky rumbled as alien fire rained, but the defense grid activated. Shimmering walls of energy rose and absorbed the strikes. Alien ships exploded in waves of fire, yet the battle was only beginning. The Empire called for reinforcements. They pushed their main carriers into orbit, massive ships like cities with endless fighters. The humans responded by unleashing their next surprise. Hidden beneath oceans, giant submarines rose and launched missiles not of ordinary kind, but missiles that split in mid-flight, each carrying swarms of drones that cut into enemy formations with speed faster than expected. The Empire fleet staggered. Commanders screamed, but still they pressed forward. Among the alien races watching from the edge of the system, fear grew. They saw the warnings they had once given now unfolding into truth. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Their silence had always been their weapon. Now that silence had broken and turned into fire, whispers spread that the Empire had made a mistake too great to recover from. Still none dared interfere. They knew to stay away from the storm. Back on the flagship of the Empire, the High Admiral stood, fury in his eyes. He could not accept that a single world could hold against them. He ordered every ship to strike at full power. Waves of fire cut across the orbit of Earth. Cities trembled under the energy. Oceans boiled at their edges. Yet the humans revealed yet another layer of defense. Hidden satellites linked together, forming massive shields of light that bent the attacks away. The aliens had never seen such technology in a species they once called young. Tension grew heavier as hours turned to endless fighting. The humans fought with everything. Every strike was a trap. Every move of the Empire brought them into another ambush. The admirals began to feel fear, something they had not known in centuries. For every human ship destroyed, 3 more seemed to rise. Not because they were endless, but because they had prepared every possible counter, every weapon, every defense. Still the humans knew this was only the beginning. They had not yet revealed the heart of their ambush. They waited, letting the Empire grow desperate, letting them throw everything forward, letting their arrogance blind them further. The commanders of Earth spoke in calm tones, timing every strike, every move, and deep below Earth the final weapon stirred, a weapon not yet shown, something that would turn the tide once and for all. As night fell on Earth and the sky burned with alien fire, humanity held their ground, their voices silent, their eyes cold. The Empire thought victory was slipping, but still not lost. They prepared for one final push, unaware that the real trap was about to close. And as the stars shone above, every alien observer knew the truth. The Empire had walked too far, and soon they would not walk back. The Empire fleet was now moving deeper into the system without fear or caution, and the commanders believed that Earth had only small tricks and nothing more, and they thought that their own power was endless and no force could stop them. But the humans had planned far more than the Empire could ever imagine, and every step of the enemy was already mapped by the Secret Defense Council of Earth, who had been preparing day and night for this exact moment. And they knew that the Empire commanders were proud and blind, and would never see the danger that was rising around them. The ships of the Empire were shining with heavy metal armor and weapons that could destroy mountains in a single strike, and their engines burned with strange blue light that carried them across the stars, and the sight of them could bring fear to any weak heart. But the humans had already built something that looked weak, but was stronger than the strongest weapon the Empire had, and that was their mind and their courage, which worked together as one. On the surface of Earth, hidden under deep oceans and mountains, there were secret bases that carried machines far more advanced than the enemy could ever believe, and these machines were not built for show but for survival, because humanity knew that the Empire would not stop until Earth was crushed, and the people of Earth would not let that happen. So every scientist, every soldier, and every worker had given their soul to create the trap that was now waiting in silence for the Empire to walk straight into it. The Empire commanders looked at Earth through their giant view screens and laughed among themselves, saying that humans were too weak and too small, and that no warning, no message, and no signal could change the truth that the Empire always won. But among the lower ranks of the Empire there were whispers and doubts, because some of them had heard the old stories about humans who fought with impossible courage and never surrendered even when outnumbered 1,000 to 1. The leader of the Empire fleet stood tall and spoke with a voice like thunder, saying that the humans had only minutes left to live, and that soon their cities would be burning, and their leaders begging for mercy, and his officers cheered with pride. But they did not know that deep inside the human command center the final stage of the plan was already starting, and that the humans were watching every movement of the Empire with eyes sharper than any hawk. In the dark silence of space between Mars and Earth, thousands of hidden drones were waiting, and each drone carried weapons that were invisible to Empire sensors, and these weapons were designed not to attack directly but to blind and confuse the enemy systems, so that when the moment came the Empire ships would lose control and drift like lost children in the dark, and the humans would strike with perfect timing. As the Empire fleet advanced, a sudden burst of light appeared across the black sky, and the commanders thought it was only a star exploding in the distance, but it was no star, it was the first wave of the human counterstrike, and in that instant the Empire realized that they had walked into a trap far greater than their pride could allow them to believe. The humans had activated a hidden energy field around the orbit of Earth, and this field twisted signals, bent sensors, and blocked communications, so the Empire ships could not see each other clearly, and their weapons could not lock onto targets, and their voices could not reach their own allies, so confusion spread through the mighty fleet like fire in a dry forest. The leader of the fleet shouted orders, but his voice was lost in broken static, and the officers panicked because their screens showed false images, and their maps changed every second, and they could not tell where the enemy was and where their own ships were, and in that storm of chaos the humans moved in silence and precision. Small human ships rose from the shadow of the moon and from behind asteroids and from the deep oceans of Earth, and they did not look powerful, but each of them carried weapons that could pierce the strongest armor of the Empire, and they moved with speed faster than any Empire vessel could follow, and they struck with precision, cutting through weak spots in the Empire fleet like blades through paper. The Empire tried to fight back, but every strike missed because their systems were blind and their targets were illusions, and the humans used the confusion to hit harder and harder until the once proud fleet began to break apart, and the commanders could not believe what was happening, and they cried out in rage and fear. But the humans did not stop, because they knew that this was only the beginning, and that the Empire would send more fleets if this one failed, and so they had to make sure that the lesson was strong enough to never be forgotten, and so the trap closed tighter and tighter until escape was impossible. In that moment, the leader of Earth Defense spoke to his people, saying that they were not fighting for power or conquest, but for freedom and survival, and that every strike they made was for the children and for the future, and his voice carried across every hidden base and every ship and gave strength to every human heart. The battle raged in silence of space, with fire flashing and ships breaking apart and debris floating like stars, but behind the violence there was a deeper silence, because the Empire was beginning to understand that they had underestimated humans, and that mistake would cost them everything. When the leader of the fleet saw his ships falling one after another, he felt a shadow of fear that he had never known before, because he realized that the humans were not weak, and they were not small, and they were not foolish, but they were something far more dangerous, because they were patient, they were clever, and they were united. And as the battle reached its peak, the humans revealed the final part of their trap, and the Empire would face something that no weapon could defend against, and no shield could stop, and the fate of the fleet was sealed in that moment. But the story was not yet over, because the war had only begun and Earth was ready for more. The Empire did not realize how deep the trap of Earth had become, and while they thought that the humans were already weakened and broken, the humans were only hiding their true power, and every hour that passed made the Empire fall more into the plan without escape, because the humans had studied them and learned every movement, every weakness, and every strategy they used, and by the time the Empire saw the truth it was already too late. The generals of the Empire shouted at their commanders to hold the lines and to push forward, but no matter how much force they sent, the humans countered in ways they had never seen before, and it was as if the Earth itself was guiding the humans and shielding them from destruction, and the alien soldiers began to feel fear in their hearts for the first time in generations, because they were taught that humans were weak and broken, but now they saw warriors rising from the ashes with eyes burning like fire and courage that no weapon could destroy. Ships of the Empire filled the skies, and their weapons rained fire, but Earth had already prepared shields hidden deep under mountains and oceans, and when the fire came it struck only illusions created by the humans, and entire fleets wasted their power on empty targets, while real human ships moved silently through the dark side of the planet, striking with precision and vanishing into the shadows, and the Empire commanders screamed in confusion, not understanding how humans could outmaneuver them. On their own world, the people of Earth who once lived in fear now stood together in unity, and every city that was burned gave birth to warriors who fought with greater strength, and children carried messages, and women built defenses, and elders guided the young, and there was no division left in the human race, and the Empire realized that they were not fighting soldiers alone, but they were fighting an entire world bound together by a single will, and that will was survival and freedom. In the deserts where the Empire thought no human could live, there were traps buried under the sands waiting for the heavy walkers of the aliens, and when they marched forward the ground exploded and swallowed them whole, and in the forests the trees themselves became weapons with vines carrying mines and hunters striking from the shadows, and in the icy mountains human fighters vanished into the snow only to reappear behind enemy lines and strike with ruthless accuracy, and everywhere the Empire turned they saw defeat, and their fear grew. The human leaders sent no mercy in their signals. They warned the Empire again and again to leave Earth, but arrogance made the aliens blind and deaf, and so the warnings became the echoes of their downfall, because the humans turned every warning into bait, and every promise into a snare, and the aliens who thought they were hunters became prey caught in the jaws of Earth. At night, the skies were filled with fire as human ships rose into space and struck the Empire carriers that floated above, and the Empire believed they had complete control of the orbit, yet the humans had hidden ships under the oceans disguised as civilian cargo, and when the moment was right they broke the surface and launched storms of missiles that tore through the Empire hulls and left burning wreckage falling to the ground, and the Empire soldiers below looked up and saw their mighty ships falling like broken stars, and their courage began to crumble. The human fighters used not only weapons of steel but weapons of mind, and they spread fear among the alien ranks with false signals, with hacked transmissions, and with voices that whispered doom into the ears of the invaders, and soon Empire soldiers fired at shadows thinking enemies were everywhere, and confusion tore through their ranks, and commanders lost control while humans pushed forward with silent determination. But the battle was not without cost, because many humans fell and the ground was filled with sacrifice, and every fallen warrior gave the survivors more reason to fight harder and to strike deeper into the heart of the enemy, and though blood stained the soil, the spirit of mankind only grew stronger and brighter, and the Empire felt the weight of a world that refused to bow. When dawn came after the longest night, the Empire tried to regroup and prepare one last great assault, but they had already lost the element of fear, because humans no longer trembled before them, and the Empire understood too late that once fear is broken no chain can hold and no army can win, and so their power began to collapse. Still, the Empire commander was not willing to accept defeat, and he ordered the last reserves to strike into the human capital, but the humans had foreseen this and laid a trap so perfect that it closed like the jaws of a beast, and as the Empire forces marched and they were surrounded from all sides by fire and steel and sky and earth, and the trap snapped shut, and the aliens realized they had walked into the very heart of doom. The humans stood with fire in their eyes and thunder in their hearts, and their voices rose as one across the fields of war, declaring that Earth would never kneel and never surrender, and the Empire saw the truth they had tried to ignore, that humanity was not weak and not broken but unbreakable. The Empire soldiers cried out in despair as wave after wave of human fire crashed upon them, and there was no escape, because behind them was destruction, and ahead of them was defiance, and around them was the rage of a planet united, and in that moment the Empire commander knew his pride had destroyed his army and his empire. And as the dust settled, the humans raised their banners over the broken machines of the Empire, and the survivors of the alien forces stared in silence at the warriors who had defeated them, and they felt respect mixed with fear, for they had never known such resistance, and they had never believed that humans could rise so high. But this was only the beginning, because though Earth had won the battle, the war was not over, and the Empire would not forget the humiliation, and the humans knew more storms would come from the stars, yet they also knew that they were ready for whatever came, because they had faced the darkness, and they had not fallen, and their courage would only grow. And so the world watched as the flames of battle died and the ashes of destruction fell, and in those ashes the spirit of mankind burned brighter than ever, and the Empire that had ignored the warnings and mocked the strength of Earth now carried the scars of their arrogance, and the story of the ambush would echo across the stars for all races to hear. The night over Earth was silent, yet the silence held a hidden power, because every soldier, every scientist, and every leader knew that the great moment was near, and the trap that had been carefully built with patience and sacrifice was now ready to be tested against the pride of the Empire that had ignored every warning and marched forward with arrogance and blind faith in their endless might. The Empire ships moved closer to the orbit, their golden armor shining against the glow of the stars, and their commanders spoke with voices filled with pride. They believed no one could stop them, they believed no one could resist them, for the Empire had ruled for centuries, and crushed all who stood in their way. But Earth was not like other worlds. Earth was wounded, yet Earth was stubborn. Earth was small, but Earth carried fire inside its heart. The fleet of the Empire descended like giants with thunder, but they did not know the web waiting for them was alive with hidden firepower and coded traps buried deep in silence, waiting for the right spark. The human fleet that looked weak and broken floated in stillness like prey trying to hide, but in truth every broken piece, every wreck, every shadow was part of a larger plan, a net of steel and light. In the command room, General Marcus stood firm, his eyes sharp as blades, his voice steady as stone. He spoke to his people with no fear. He told them that the Empire believed Earth was weak, but the truth was that Earth was united more than ever, and this unity was the strongest weapon. No technology, no giant army could match the will of a united people who fought not for conquest but for survival. On the Empire flagship, the Admiral laughed. He saw the weak fleet of humans, and thought victory was already his. He sent orders to push forward and break the formation. He wanted to crush Earth quickly to show the galaxy that warnings meant nothing to the Empire, but what he could not see was the invisible pattern of the human fleet. Their silence was not weakness, their stillness was not fear, their broken line was not chaos, it was a map, it was a door into the trap. The first wave of Empire ships moved forward with fire, but as they entered the field of silent debris, the air itself seemed to change. The signals grew heavy, the sensors grew blind, the stars around them seemed to bend. It was the hidden net of human science, a mix of hacked frequencies, false images, and silent weapons waiting in shadows. Every Empire ship thought they saw empty space, but in truth they were flying into the jaws of Earth. The first strike came without sound, a pulse of light that cracked their shields like glass. The Empire commanders shouted, but before they could recover, a storm of hidden cannons fired from what looked like wrecks and old satellites. Beams of pure heat and waves of magnetic force smashed into the golden armor. The ships shook like mountains in an earthquake. The Empire shouted that it was only luck, that it was only one strike, but then another wave came, and another, and the trap began to close. On Earth, the people watched from screens as the sky above lit with flashes like stars falling one after another. Hope filled their hearts, but fear remained, because the Empire was still strong. Even in the trap they fought back with fire, and their weapons broke through many defenses. Human ships burned in the silence of space, their pieces falling like sparks across the night. General Marcus knew the battle was not won, yet he gave orders with steady calm. He told the fleet to stay patient, to hold the line, and to wait for the perfect moment, because every trap has one center, every plan has one heart, and he knew the Empire Admiral would soon reveal his pride. The Admiral would not accept retreat, he would push deeper into the trap, and when he did, Earth would strike with everything. The Admiral shouted to his men, his voice full of anger. He could not believe humans dared to fight in this way. He told them to break through, to crush the defenses, to show no mercy. He ordered the flagship forward, his golden ship larger than a city, glowing with power, and surrounded by his elite guard, they moved like a spear into the core of the human trap. The human fleet opened their wings, the ships moved apart like doors opening to let the Empire pass deeper, until there was no escape. The Admiral saw it, but he thought it was fear, he thought they were retreating. He laughed, and told his soldiers that humans were cowards, but the laughter would soon die. Because deep in the shadow of the moon, hidden for weeks, a weapon waited. It was not big, it was not grand, but it was sharp and silent, a weapon built from sacrifice of many nations, a beam of light, focused through mirrors spread across the orbit, a chain of fire waiting to be released. General Marcus looked at the signal, and then gave the final command. The mirrors aligned, the power charged, and the silence broke. A river of pure white light cut across the sky. It struck the golden flagship with force of a sun. The shields cracked, the armor burned, the golden ship shook as if the gods themselves struck it. The Admiral screamed, but his voice was lost in the storm. The flagship twisted and turned, but the net closed tighter and tighter until the giant began to fall, pieces of fire breaking from its body. On Earth, people cheered, tears in their eyes, voices rising like thunder across the world, but General Marcus stood silent. He knew the Empire was not finished, he knew this was only one strike, and more battles would come. He looked at the stars, and whispered that Earth had taken the first step, but the road was long and dark. The Empire fleet saw their flagship burning. They shouted in fear, but also in rage. They swore revenge, they swore no trap could defeat them, they swore they would return stronger than ever, and in the silence of space their eyes burned with fire. And so the night ended not with peace, but with a warning. Both sides felt the weight of what had begun. Earth had shown its power, the Empire had felt its pride break, and the galaxy watched in silence, knowing that a storm far greater was now rising. The night sky over Earth was filled with strange light as the final part of the conflict was about to begin, and every human heart beat with a mix of fear and courage, for they all knew that the Empire had ignored all the warnings and had now walked into the great ambush prepared with care and patience by Earth and its hidden allies, and the trap was finally closing tighter and tighter with every passing moment. Ships of the Empire floated above the clouds like huge shadows blocking out the stars, and their weapons glowed with power, ready to strike down at the cities below. But on Earth the people stood together, not with fear, but with a strong will and quiet fire in their eyes, for they had waited too long and had lost too much to allow surrender, and now was the moment where history itself would change forever. The Empire commanders thought themselves clever and strong, believing that humans had only crude weapons and weak machines, yet they did not understand that Earth had built layers upon layers of defense hidden in the very oceans, mountains, and skies, and that the ambush was not just one great strike, but a storm of surprises waiting to be unleashed at the right time. In the control center buried under the mountain, the human generals watched the screens glowing with bright dots marking the Empire ships above, and the silence of the room was deep like the air before a thunderstorm until the leader finally gave the command, and in that instant the trap began to close. From the dark sea rose hidden towers of steel that had slept under the waves for years waiting for this moment, and from them burst great streams of energy that tore into the Empire fleet from below, catching them unprepared and unguarded, and from the mountains came hidden cannons releasing beams that cut through the dark sky like blazing fire, and every Empire ship caught in the fire turned into falling wrecks raining down upon the earth they had wished to conquer. The Empire forces tried to fight back, sending waves of fire down at the planet, but the shields humans had built from stolen alien knowledge shone like bright walls around the cities, and the fire was broken into harmless sparks, while hidden squadrons of human ships, once kept secret, now rose into the sky fast and sharp like arrows of light, striking at the Empire from every side. The humans had waited for this day, learning from every mistake, every battle, every loss, and they had studied the Empire more than the Empire had ever imagined, and now that knowledge was used with perfect timing so that every move of the enemy was countered, every strike was turned back, and every path of escape was cut off. The Empire commanders grew desperate, their voices sharp with anger and fear as they saw their great ships fall one after another, and they began to understand too late that the warnings they had ignored were not empty words, but the truth of a people who had turned their pain into strength and their weakness into iron. In the middle of the great battle, a huge Empire flagship glowed brighter than the rest, leading its fleet with pride, but soon it too was caught in the trap as human ships swarmed around it, striking again and again until its shields cracked like broken glass and fire burst from its sides, while the humans below cheered with voices that reached the sky. But the battle was not only in the skies, for on the ground Empire soldiers had landed in many places, and human fighters clashed with them in the forests, deserts, and cities, and though the Empire soldiers were stronger and taller, the humans fought with fury and cunning, striking from shadows, setting traps, and using the land itself as their weapon, and slowly the invaders began to lose their ground step by step as the people of Earth rose against them together. The Empire had come thinking it was a hunt, but now they were the ones hunted, their ships broken, their soldiers surrounded, and their pride turned into ashes, while the humans pressed harder with no thought of surrender, for they knew this was their only chance to win their freedom and to show the universe that Earth was no longer weak. Yet even in their victory the humans did not forget the cost, for they remembered the cities burned, the families lost, the children taken, and they knew that the fight was not only for land or for power but for justice and survival, and for the right to live free without chains of fear. As the Empire forces tried to retreat, their paths were blocked, for the human ambush had been made with care, and every way out was a trap, and so the Empire fleet found itself trapped in the web of fire, unable to escape the storm of Earth, and one by one their ships fell until only silence was left above the clouds. At last the sky cleared of fire and smoke, and the people of Earth stood together looking up with tears and cheers as they saw that the Empire had fallen into their trap and lost everything, and for the first time in many years they felt the weight of fear lift from their hearts and hope rise like the dawn of a new day. But the leaders of Earth knew that this was not the end, for the Empire was vast and powerful, and though this fleet was destroyed others might come, and the universe was wide and filled with enemies who would test the strength of humans again, yet this victory was the first great step, and it would echo across the stars, warning every power that Earth was no longer to be ignored. In the ruins of the last Empire ship that fell burning into the sea, a message was carried across the stars telling the story of their defeat, and the warning they had failed to hear, and so the legend of the ambush of Earth began spreading across the galaxy, becoming a tale of both fear and respect, and showing that even the mightiest empire could fall when it ignored the spirit of those who would not bow. The humans stood ready with their weapons, and their courage stronger than ever, waiting for what would come next, for they knew this was not just a victory, but the beginning of a new age where Earth would rise among the stars not as prey, but as a hunter who had shown its teeth and would never be silenced again. And so the story closed with the light of victory shining on the faces of those who had fought and survived, while far away in the darkness other empires listened and whispered to each other about the trap of Earth and the strength of its people and the future that had now begun.